So this is chapter 1 of a series of videos that I've decided to make and call it Useful Information to Fall Asleep To. I've decided to do this on the United Kingdom first. So this is called Clear, Concise Information on the UK. What is the UK? What is it? The UK stands for United Kingdom. The UK, or the United Kingdom, is made up of 4 countries: Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Now, it is true that all of these are countries. England is a country, Scotland is a country, Northern Ireland is a country, and Wales is a country. However, really, in terms of power, they are not equal, and here is why. Do all of these 4 countries each have their own prime minister? Not really. In the United Kingdom, there is really only one prime minister, and that person is located in England. That person leads the United Kingdom Parliament, or the House of Commons in England. That person is the prime minister of the entire United Kingdom. Then why are Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales considered to be countries on their own? Well, in all 3 countries of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, they have their own legislature. So in Scotland, there is a Scottish legislature, and the head of that legislature is called a First Minister. Same thing for Northern Ireland and Wales. However, for each of these 3 legislatures in Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, they are only allowed to create laws on certain subject areas or certain matters. These are jurisdictions, areas that the head of the United Kingdom, in other words, the UK government, has handed down to them. Sometimes they're called the devolved areas. So here they are. The following things are devolved in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. In other words, these are jurisdictions that, or areas of law or matters that these 3 countries, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, are allowed to make laws with respect to health and social care, education and training. And it goes on forestry, housing, tourism, sport, heritage, that type of thing. However, even with respect to these laws that these devolved legislatures can make in these 3 devolved countries, the United Kingdom Parliament has the authority to change, to strike down any law that any legislature has made in the entire United Kingdom. All right, so let's look at Scotland, for example. So Scotland is considered to be a country. Its capital is Edinburgh. The type of government is considered to be a devolved parliamentary legislature. Their first minister is John Swinney. Let's look at the Scottish Parliament. So let's look at this devolved parliamentary legislature. So it's called the Scottish Parliament. So remember, this is a separate body from the House of Commons in the United Kingdom, which is in England. So what do we call people who are elected to serve in the Scottish Parliament in Scotland? Well, we call those people a member of Scottish Parliament, an MSP. There are 129 elected members of Scottish Parliament. So this is an election that would occur only in Scotland to create their devolved parliamentary legislature. All right, so currently the Scottish National Party is in power in Scotland. And remember that this is the legislature that would make laws with respect to those devolved areas that we spoke about a moment ago. So let's look now at what the meaning of MP is in Scotland. Well, let's go back to that UK ultimate authoritative power in England, the UK Parliament or the UK government. In the House of Commons in England, in the UK government, are there any elected officials from Scotland? Yes, those are called MPs or members of Parliament. So that would mean that in Scotland there are two types of elections. One election would be just for Scotland, where you elect one of your 129 members of Scottish Parliament or MSP. And then when there is an election in the entire UK, then you would have your chance to elect someone to represent Scotland in the House of Commons, in this overarching overall UK Parliament or the House of Commons. Let's look and see how many MPs are sitting in the House of Commons that were elected from Scotland. Currently, in the House of Commons in England, in the United Kingdom Parliament, there are 57 MPs that are from Scotland and that represent Scotland in the United Kingdom Parliament. All right, so Scotland has 57 parliamentary seats. And here is a picture of the most recent members of Parliament before they were sworn in. So these people are from Scotland, they live in Scotland, and they were elected by Scottish citizens. So that would be in the overall, giant United Kingdom election. So while the first ministers are the leaders of the devolved governments in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, meaning they each lead their respective country within the UK with a smaller set of powers compared to the Prime Minister, who oversees the whole nation, all four countries. Now, the other problem is that the House of Commons, the Prime Minister in England, the ultimate authority, the Prime Minister of the entire United Kingdom, there's only one, that House of Commons, that government, that Parliament in the UK, they can create or end any law in the entire UK. Here's another problem. Let's look at how many members of Parliament, in other words, in this important supreme United Kingdom House of Commons Parliament in England, have the number of people that represent Scotland, has it gone up or down? It's gone down. It used to be 59, now it's 57. Let's see if either Wales or Northern Ireland, Wales went down by 8 seats. There was no change for Northern Ireland, and England increased by 10 members of Parliament. While I'm trying to remain unbiased, I can't help but notice that it doesn't look like this is a very democratic decision. Now, I'm sure there are all sorts of excuses and other reasons that may make sense for redrawing the constituency areas so as to reduce or increase the number of MPs. I can't help but recall that the Welsh government, who now has the greatest loss to their representation in the House of Commons, they were very vocal about the fact that King Charles didn't have to follow the law. This is some opposition that they were raising last year. All right, so let's look at Wales' own legislature, or Wales' own parliament. What is it called? Well, here it is. All right, so looking at within the country of Wales, looking at their own legislature, well, there are 60 members. And what do we call them? We call them 60 MSs. Now, the reason why we call them MSs is because the Parliament of Wales itself is called the Senedd or Senedd, Senedd. So there are members of Senedd, 60 of them. There is an ongoing effort by all of the devolved countries to have more autonomy, because it does appear, especially when we look at Wales, that their authority in lawmaking and in ruling themselves is really significantly restricted by the UK Parliament. So the Parliament, the Welsh Parliament within Wales, we know that they have 60 members or MSs, and the First Minister is Eluned Morgan. For each of these three countries, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, there is usually a piece of legislation that is made by the UK. So it would be a piece of legislation that's made by Parliament or Westminster with respect to the division of powers or the division of jurisdiction when it comes to lawmaking. In other words, there is a Government of Wales Act, and somewhere in that act you will find a list of areas that the Welsh government can make laws and a list of areas reserved for the UK. Okay, so you can see here within Wales itself, in their own legislature, there are 60 MSs, and as we know, there are 32 MPs. Let's look at Northern Ireland. So again, Northern Ireland is one of these countries in the UK, but they have their own legislature called the Northern Ireland Assembly. All right, so we would expect there would be a first minister, and that person is Michelle O'Neill. Now, when there is an election in Northern Ireland, just in Northern Ireland for their own government, what do we call the people who are elected, and how many of them are there? Well, they would be called the MLAs, members of the Legislative Assembly. Okay, so if we go back, we know that in Scotland, we call these local government elected officials, the 129 in Scotland, the MSPs. In Wales, they are the MSs, and in Northern Ireland, they are the MLAs. So these are the local or devolved government elected officials. However, in all of these three countries, as you know, there are also MPs who are elected to go to England and represent us in the House of Commons. All right, let's look at the number of MLAs. So there are 90 seats for elections within Northern Ireland to elect your MLA. Now, let's go back and look at the number of MPs that are elected in Northern Ireland who will represent the interests of Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom Parliament. I believe there were 18 of them. Let's check. Yes, there are 18. And remember when I told you that Northern Ireland didn't get cut? The number of their MPs wasn't cut severely like it was in Wales and in Scotland. And remember that I said it was due to the redrawing of the boundary lines of constituencies? Well, here's the 18 constituencies in Northern Ireland. So they're just areas of land. All right, so there are 18 MPs in Northern Ireland, and these people sit in England in the UK House of Commons, as opposed to the 90 local MLAs who sit in the legislature within Northern Ireland itself. Now, I thought I should mention something about the currency in the entire UK. It's called the pound, so it's kind of like the dollar. However, here's the thing. So let's look at, in Scotland, for example, if you wanted to rent a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1-reception, I guess that's a living room, apartment, you're looking at £1,031 per month, or £237 per week. What would that mean if you were American or Canadian? Well, if you're American and you travel to the United Kingdom and you trade in your $1,000 for British pounds, you'll only get back £806. Let's see what will happen if you're Canadian with your $1,000. Oh boy, the poor old Canadian travels to the UK with 1,000 Canadian dollars. And they exchange their money for British pounds, and they get back almost half of that. £554 they'll get back for their 1,000 Canadian dollars. Very, very expensive place to live. But for many, it's worth it. All right, so finally, let's look at the United Kingdom Parliament, which is called the House of Commons. So instead of a first minister, there is a prime minister. And let's look at how many seats or how many constituencies there are in England. So there won't be any MLAs or MSPs or MSs. There are going to be MPs. And let's look at how many there are in England. There are 543 constituencies in England, 543 MPs. Only 32 in Wales, 18 in Northern Ireland, 57 in Scotland. Now, it is true that England is geographically much larger than the other 3 countries, but not by that much. I'm sure there are also drastic differences in population. However, what really does that mean when it comes to the democratic voice of a country? The problem is that the less members of parliament a country has, the less of a voice it has in the UK Parliament. Why is that so important? Because of this. Parliamentary sovereignty is a principle of the United Kingdom Constitution. It makes Parliament the supreme legal authority in the United Kingdom, which can create or end any law. So it's great to have 160 MLAs or MSs, but really the number of members of parliament that a country has is very significant and relevant with respect to its ability to have a voice. Now, You may also hear of the body or entity called the House of Lords. There is the House of Commons, which refers to the 650 MPs or members of Parliament, and these are the elected officials from all over the UK. And then there is another body called the House of Lords. I wouldn't worry too much about the House of Lords. They are not elected, for one thing. Secondly, the idea behind it was sort of like the Senate in Canada, which is that they were to be the sober second thought, or they were to oversee and look at laws that had already been passed and hold hearings and interview different groups and give their opinion, sort of to be the sober second thought with respect to proposed legislation. I always believed that the Senate, for example, in Canada, was a very, very important body. The Privy Council, which I might talk about later on, the history of the Privy Council, which is what preceded the Senate in Canada, was like a sober second thought. I believe that was the intent behind the House of Lords. However, I'm not sure if that is what's happening today. And finally, a lot of you may be wondering, what about the king? Does the king have any power to rule in the United Kingdom? Can the king make law? Can the king refuse to pass law? Can the king change law? The king certainly has the power to withhold royal assent. So I would argue that there is a lot of power that the king has. There were over 1,000 pieces of legislation that Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Elizabeth, before she died, had looked over and ensured that these legislations, these proposed pieces of legislation, included an exception. And that exception was there so that the monarch did not have to follow the law. So there were 1,000 pieces of legislation that Queen Elizabeth, before she died, she withheld her assent until she made sure that in all of those pieces of proposed legislation, it was made clear that the law did not apply to the monarch. That's right. The monarch, the king or the queen, whoever is presiding over the United Kingdom as the crowned monarch, they do not have to follow any law. I hope by now you have fallen asleep. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas for any further videos. Thanks for watching or listening. Bye.